ControlNet allows us just that, greater control over the output that we receive from the input that we give to Stable Diffusion. Now, I have Stable Diffusion running through a web UI or Automatic 1111. If you're unsure how to get this running locally on your computer, check out the tutorial that's linked in the card above, as that will show you how to actually do the install in a couple of minutes only and get to this page right here. Once we're in this page, we need to actually grab the ControlNet model. That'll be this right here in the text to image. You can see we drop down and we have ControlNet. We're going to do that very simply by just going up to the Extensions tab. Now, once we're inside of the Extensions tab, I'm sure you're well aware that you can load from here and just go through all of the different extensions, but ControlNet is not going to be in there. So what we need to do is go to install from URL. This will be URL for extensions git repository, and if that doesn't make sense, that's perfectly fine. You're going to take link 1 down in the description of this video, conveniently right next to that subscribe and like button, and you're going to copy this right here. This is the GitHub repository that's going to give you ControlNet. You're going to go ahead and click on install. Now, very annoyingly, when you click install, you're not going to get any completion message, but don't click it twice or 3 times thinking it didn't go through. Once you click install, you're going to go back to installed and you will have a little update running here. Now you can see that I reset my Stable Diffusion every time I do one of these new tutorials so I can start from the beginning. That's why there's not a bunch of extensions built in here like Refusion and Deforum. Anyways, once it's done loading, you're going to click on check for updates and then apply and restart UI. This is going to restart your locally hosted window and it will restart it with ControlNet. Now, once you do that, let's go ahead and go back to text to image. You should now have this little drop-down window here. Before we continue, I want to explain something that I haven't heard from other tutorials on YouTube about Stable Diffusion or ControlNet in general. A basic understanding of Stable Diffusion is that it's a speaker-listener model, and it runs top-down. That means each one of these windows, or each one of these containers, is speaking to the container below it, and the containers above are then listening to the loop at the bottom. So everything we input starting from top down is going to be listening. Now, I want to start out by saying when you first get Stable Diffusion, you're going to have this v.1.1.150 pruned EMA only safe tensors model. This model is very, very limited. It wasn't when it first came out, but now that we've had to play with it for a few months, we have better models. In order to do that, you're going to go to link number 2. And like I said, we're starting from the top down, realizing this is the speaker listener model. Link number 2 is going to take you right here. This is Civit AI, and this has a bunch of different models that you can use inside of your Stable Diffusion. So you can see some of the examples here. My favorite one, and the one I'm going to be using for this, is Protogen Nova. You'll go ahead and just simply click on the model that you want, and then click on download. You'll notice it is quite a hefty size at almost 7.5 gigs. Once that's done, I'm going to show you exactly how we can install this to Stable Diffusion, or actually get it running, I should say, on our Stable Diffusion. So here we have a file explorer, and let me go ahead and open another one. So when you first get it downloaded, that's going to be on the left side here. You're going to go to Downloads, and you will see that diffusion model, that's 7.5 gigs downloaded right here. On the right side, we're actually going to find our Stable Diffusion models folder. For me, that's in OSC, Users, ASIN. Then we're going to go to Documents, A1111 Web UI, Stable Diffusion Web UI, and then you can see Models right here. We're just going to simply grab it, drag it, and I'm not going to do it with this photo, but we're going to drag it and drop it into this models folder, and then we're going to go ahead and completely restart Automatic 1111. Once you do that, you will hit the refresh, and you will see that you will now have the Protogen Nova Stable Diffusion checkpoint. Still going top down, we know that we have our prompt and our negative prompt here, By now, you know what prompting and negative prompting is. If you want it to be included or show up in your image, you're going to go ahead and put your text in the prompt. And if you want something to not show up specifically in your image, you're going to give it a negative prompt. Now let's actually move down a little bit because we're in the downloading things area of the video, so go ahead and drop down ControlNet like so. Now we're going to talk about preprocessors and models. This is going to be what basically feeds, or this is going to be what our generator up here listens to in addition to our text prompt, and this is why ControlNet is so amazing. Now models here is going to be in link 3. You'll notice that I run a few models, and don't worry, these models are only about 1.5 GB, not 7.5. I want you to grab 2 models, and don't worry, I'm going to show you exactly how. We're going to grab Canny, and we're going to grab OpenPose. That's going to be in link 3 down below. Let me go ahead and open that here. It's going to take you to this right here. Each one of these is a model. You can see the size and the option to download them right here. We're going to go ahead and grab the one called canny.path. Make sure you're not grabbing the .yaml. You want to grab the .path. So we're going to grab canny.path and openpose.path. Just for the sake of this tutorial, you can definitely mess around with all of these. Now, the install for these is a little bit different. Now, you can see that I have a soft edge pack right here that I downloaded. We're going to go back to our Stable Diffusion folder through Users, ASIN, Documents, and Automatic 1111, and Stable Diffusion Web UI. Now, when we installed that checkpoint, we put it in this models folder right here. This is the models folder for all of Stable Diffusion. We want the models folder just for ControlNet because these processors are going to be running explicitly inside of ControlNet. So instead of models, we're going to click on Extensions, Web UI ControlNet, and then now you see we have another models folder here. This folder is where we're going to drop these ControlNet models. So once you drop it in there, we'll go ahead and drop in the line art as well and the SD15 model. So we just added 3 new models to our ControlNet just like that. When you do that, much like the previous, you're going to go ahead and restart your ControlNet Web UI or your Automatic 1111 Web UI. Now we're going to have some models to choose from. Now I didn't restart, so you won't see the line art, but you will see Canny and OpenPose. I'm going to go ahead and click on Canny, and then we're going to go ahead and set the preprocessor to the same thing we have our model set as, which is going to be Canny. You'll notice it dropped down a whole new window here, but we will talk about that in just a moment. For now, we're going to drop image here, and I'm going to choose this guy right here, or these 2 individuals. One thing that we want to note is that in order for the generator to be able to listen to ControlNet, we need to enable it. So we're just going to hit enable. One thing we can test out is if we allow preview, it'll show us what it's going to feed into generate. So when we click generate and it listens to our ControlNet, this right here, this preprocessor preview, this is going to be what actually feeds or speaks to the listen function on generate. So we can get a preview here of what Canny does by clicking this little explosion or the run preprocessor icon. And we can see it gets a nice line art graph. It's detecting all of the little lines. If you can handle it, or if your GPU can handle it, you can also run Pixel Perfect. Pixel Perfect will give you even more definition. So I'm going to unclick that now just because the computer doesn't like it if I'm recording and running Pixel Perfect. Just for the sake of it, let's go ahead and show you what OpenPose is, because it really depends on the photograph. If you have one person or one individual or one subject close up to the camera, OpenPose may actually be better than Canny. So we're going to go to OpenPose Full. This will detect all of it, and I'm not entirely sure how well it'll work on this photograph, but for the sake of the tutorial, it'll work as well. Remember to set your model to the same thing as your preprocessor, and then we can go ahead and run. Now, while that's loading, we can look at a couple of things down here, and actually you can see it loaded quite fast. This detects basic body signatures, including arms, legs, torso, and face. In this case, they're so far away, it didn't detect the torso as well as it did just two very long legs. So like I said, for this case, we're going to actually use Canny. So let's run back to Canny real quick, run that preview so we know what we're getting, and now we can talk about this down here. Now, the control weight, this is going to be the weight that you're giving to ControlNet, or basically the freedom. I have always just left this as at 1. I've played around with it quite a bit, but leaving it at 1 seems to be just fine. It is up for interpretation. You can play around with it and get whatever style you like. With starting and ending control step, this is letting generate up here. This is letting generate know when you want it to start listening to ControlNet. So if you want it to do its own thing for the first 20% of the generation, and then at 20% start listening to ControlNet, you can set this at 0.2. Same thing if you just wanted it to listen to ControlNet between 20 and 75%. It will start listening to ControlNet at 20%, and it'll stop listening to ControlNet at 75%. I like giving ControlNet complete control because, well, that's why I use ControlNet, is so we have the full generation following our guidelines. If you want it to follow a little bit less strictly, you can set that to whatever you would like. Now, of course, the preprocessor resolution, that is simply the resolution of the photo. The higher you set the resolution, the longer it's going to take, and the more tasking it's going to be on your GPU. Now, we also have these thresholds here. These thresholds are basically going to be giving more or less artistic freedom to ControlNet. These right down here, these three, are up for user interpretation, as they will just do subtle changes to your final output. Alright, let's go down to control mode and resize mode. You don't really need to listen to these unless you want it to do something extremely specific. Either my prompt is more important, that'll be the prompt that you enter up in here, and generate will give more weight to your prompt when it's listening, or ControlNet is more important. It will loosely follow your text prompt that you give up here when you ask generate to listen to ControlNet, and ControlNet will speak more to your preprocessor preview than it will to your text prompt. Now, crop and resize, just resize, or resize and fill, you can set the dimensions here to something different through this right up here with the width and height. So this is basically telling the generate listen function either we want to listen to the control mode down here, we want to crop and resize it, just resize it, or resize and fill, or we just want to let it do its thing with the width and height here. As long as we have this enabled, we know that it's going to listen when we generate. Let's go ahead and talk about this here. Now, sampling method basically just have a bunch of different depictions of your image. It's up to user interpretation or user preference as to which you like. I can tell you that models such as DPM Keras are going to take longer to generate and use more GPU power. The very first time I ever generate something, I like to just use Euler A or Euler, as this is good for generating large batches of images so you can get an image that you really like, or at least a style that you really like, before continuing to inpainting or image to image, which we will talk about in the next video. Sampling steps is going to be how many steps it takes when generating. You can think about this, if you've used Midjourney, as the style or the --s between 0 and 1000. Here we just go between 1 and 150. Leaving this between 20 and 30, right around 25, generally works for everything I'm doing, at least inside of Euler. I may set the sampling steps up higher when I'm going to really refine or perfect an image. These down here restore faces. If you're really trying to capture a face, you can click that. Tiling is going to be for repetitive images, or if you want something that's going to have a pattern-like output that you can layer multiple times. And higher and fixes is going to take really a smaller resolution of your image, which I'm not entirely sure why you would want that. It says that it can improve details, but with lowering the resolution, I honestly haven't seen that. So I leave all three of these blank for the most of the time. So now we have our ControlNet set up. We can go ahead and enter our prompt. Now to begin the prompt, we want to make sure that we're basically telling it what it's seeing. So we have two people standing. Now, where do we want to put them? Let's put them in futuristic Neon Tokyo City. Okay, now we're going to take this and we're going to increase the weight because above all things, we want two people standing in a futuristic Neon Tokyo City. That's what we want above all else. So we're going to highlight it. We're going to hold the control key on our keyboard and we're going to hit the up arrow and let's go ahead and give it a weight of 1.2. So this is how you increase the weight in your prompts. Now you can go ahead and type in whatever you want for your prompt here, but I have everything saved in what's known as styles, at least for this tutorial's sake. So we're going to go on the right side here and talk about styles for a brief second, how you can get them and how you can find them. So this is where you find all of your styles. And you can see here we have illustrative, and that's the one that I've saved for this. Once we click it, it'll be on, and generate will be listening to our style alongside our prompt. Let's talk about how we can actually get a style though. So let's click this off and let's click that out. Let's say that we want a style. Let's create a style real quick. So let's say for this, let's go digital art, concept art, let's add Neon Tokyo, glowing lights, high clarity, cinematography still, let's say depth of field, painterly, and let's just go with this for now. So let's say we want to have this as a style. So let's type that into the prompt field, go over to the right, and it says save style. There's some other options like applying selected styles to current prompts, and then you can just hover over these, show and hide, delete, and go back to last prompt. If we go ahead and take this and hit save style, it'll prompt to give us a name. Let's just say, let's call this Neon Tokyo, and click OK. Now we can go ahead and delete this because as it says right here, we only have 75 words that we can input. So let's go back to two women standing in futuristic Neon Tokyo City. Let's go ahead and take this prompt, and again we're going to up the weight. Now we can go ahead and add our style. You can see here we have the Neon Tokyo style that we just saved, and we will go ahead and apply it. Now we can go ahead and click on generate. Once this generates, we will talk about more things such as the batch count and batch size. And we are generated. One thing that I should note, all you're trying to do in this first step with Euler and your prompting is get a base idea. We can go in and heavily edit all of this in painting and image to image, and using other extensions like Deforum, we can just go wild. So as long as you have the base idea, or the base vibe, I guess you could say, of what you're trying to get, you're good. ControlNet has worked. But let's go ahead and talk about batch count and batch size, as well as CFG scale. Now this is the classifier free guidance scale. It basically says, how heavily should our image that we generate over here rely on our prompt? It's another one of those up to user interpretation, as you can set this anywhere between 1 and 30. I use either a 7, 7.5, or 8, and it seems to work just fine. Over here we have batch count and batch size. We're going to go ahead and start with batch size, because this is going to be how many images we generate every time we click on generate. Batch count is going to be how many batches of how much size are we going to generate. Right now we're generating one batch of 4 images. If we take this up to 2, we're going to be generating 2 batches of 4 images each, or 8 images total. So let's go ahead and put this at 1. We'll set this at 4. We'll click generate, and we'll be right back when this is done. Now we can have 4 different generations based on our prompt. And we can even see on the bottom here that we are in fact running off of our ControlNet. It's taking our ControlNet image and giving us a bunch of different variations. Personally, I think that I like this one the best, just the basic glowing colors. Like I said, we can change this in inpainting, but feel free to mess around with it as much as you want. For the sake of the tutorial, I want to show you what OpenPose will do, because let's go ahead and go to OpenPose Full, OpenPose Model. Let's go ahead and check out the preview just to make sure it's still registering the bodies. It is. Now once we do that, let's go ahead and just click generate again. It's going to generate 4 images, and we'll be right back. Wow, we got some wildly different results, but why is that? We can see that we actually have actually 2 women standing in a futuristic city. As before, it followed the lines that we had in our ControlNet. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. It followed the pillars, and it followed all of the rubble in the background. And we really did this to make a point that if you want to extract just the people from an image, OpenPose is just going to take the people and it's going to have full open interpretation over the background. In Canny, which we can just run that back real quick, I won't regenerate it, but just to show you the difference, inside of Canny, it's going to take all of these little lines, including the people, inside of its prompt, giving a weight to specifically the 2 women. And inside of this, we can actually bump this up by itself. Let's see here. For some reason we are lagging. There we go. We can bump the weight of the 2 women up, and then standing in a futuristic city up even more. So we can mess around with the weights as much as we want. If we wanted the most important thing, we can see it's a little blurry here, so we can take high clarity and we can bump the weight of that up as well. But I just wanted to show the difference of Canny to OpenPose. OpenPose is extracting the people and leaving open interpretation for the background. Canny is going to take the lines and edges in your initial image and generate specifically to that. Once we have the image that we want, or the base image, in this case I would probably be using something like this. We can go ahead and do a multitude of things. We can of course just save this photo, we can save it as a zip file, or these 2 right here, which we're going to be showing in the next video, is actually interpreting this image or clarifying it even more with image to image, and more importantly with InPaint. InPaint's going to allow us to go in and change specific things, like we can blur out the face, maybe change it to a robot or something of even higher clarity. We can go in the background and change specific elements to increase that depth of field, or add different elements, like we could add a little shopping cart here, or a vending machine, something like that, maybe a hanging neon sign here. But we can go in and actually change this image and manipulate it. So I hope that gives you a better understanding of just how to use ControlNet. Like I said, if you need Stable Diffusion installed, or you're interested in all of the different AI tools, extensions, and apps that are coming out, check out one of the 2 videos or both of the videos on your screen now. Don't forget to like, as that really helps this video get out in the algorithm and helps support the channel, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this in the future.